I was still holding the pumpkin pie when my father looked me in the eye and said, "Don't come back, Lauren. Not until you return the 50,000." It took a moment for the words to register, long enough for the steam to keep curling from the stuffing dish, for the flicker of candles to dance across the kitchen walls, for me to glance down at the pie like it might explain what I just heard. I'd baked it the night before, just like every year, using Mom's old recipe with the extra nutmeg and half a teaspoon of maple syrup. I'd driven 3 hours from Chicago in fog so thick the highway disappeared every few miles. But none of that mattered now. No one spoke. Not my brother David, who suddenly found the tablecloth fascinating. Not my sister Lisa, whose red eyes and silent posture told me she'd been preparing for this moment. And not even Mom, sweet, soft-voiced Mom, who stood silently by the sink holding a dish towel like a lifeline. I didn't sit down, couldn't. Instead, I stood frozen in the entryway, the pie suddenly heavy in my hands, and asked, "What exactly are you accusing me of?" Lisa finally looked up. Her voice was clear, practiced. "The money disappeared right after you helped Mom set up her online banking. We didn't want to believe it was you, but the bank confirmed the transfers were done digitally. You were the only one with access." It wasn't just the accusation that knocked the air out of me. It was the betrayal. I looked at Mom. She didn't nod, didn't shake her head, just pressed a napkin to her mouth like the truth made her nauseous. They had already decided, and I was no longer the daughter who came home with pie. I was the suspect who stole from her own mother. Before I go deeper, tell me, have you ever been cut out of your own family without warning? Comment the time and place you're listening from below. And if this story feels painfully familiar, hit like, share with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories just like this. Now, let me tell you what happened next. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I didn't demand they reconsider. I just set the pie, still warm, still perfect, on the edge of the granite countertop. The tin clicked softly as it met the surface. That sound stayed with me longer than their silence. I slipped on my coat without fastening it and walked out, leaving the smell of rosemary and betrayal behind. The air outside was cold, the kind that bites even through thick wool. As I stepped off the porch, I heard the faint clink of silverware resume inside. They hadn't waited for me to leave before continuing dinner. I got in the car and drove. Not home, because where was that now? Instead, I pulled into the same roadside motel I always passed on my way into town. I never thought I'd stop there, let alone on Thanksgiving night. The lobby smelled like cinnamon air freshener and burnt coffee. The clerk, a teenager with smudged eyeliner and a bored voice, handed me a room key without asking any questions. I was grateful for that small kindness. In the room, I kicked off my boots, sat on the edge of the bed, and let the reality settle like dust. My family thought I stole $50,000 from my mother. I was a forensic auditor. I'd uncovered embezzlement at multinational corporations, traced shell companies across 3 countries, and testified in federal court. And yet my own family had decided I was the villain in their story. I should have cried, I didn't. Instead, I sat still, my mind turning like clockwork. The accusation didn't fit. I thought back to the Sunday afternoon I helped Mom go digital, how she had hesitated before entering each password, how she laughed when she wrote it all down in her old floral notebook and slid it into the junk drawer near the stove. I'd left town the next morning, confident she was all set. 4 weeks later, they claimed the money had vanished, and just like that, I was guilty. But guilt leaves fingerprints, and if they wanted to treat me like the criminal in the family, they were about to find out what happens when the accused is also the investigator. I didn't sleep much that night. The motel room was too quiet, too clean, too far from the chaos I'd left behind. My mind kept circling the same point. They didn't even ask if I did it. By sunrise, I was back at the desk in the corner of the room, a weak cup of coffee by my side, my laptop glowing against the dim light. Years of experience had trained me to chase inconsistencies, to look past what people said and focus on what they did. I started where I always did: who benefited. If someone drained Mom's account, it wasn't for kicks. That kind of money had a destination, a purpose, a plan. The withdrawal pattern they described, large sums quickly spaced done online, wasn't just sloppy theft. It mimicked a case I was already working on at my firm. A string of elder financial abuse claims, specifically retirees who lost their savings in just 3 transactions. And there was a name that kept coming up in those reports: Greenwell Mutual, the same bank where Mom kept her money. Technically, I wasn't supposed to use my firm's resources for personal matters, but I still had access to internal compliance data. I pinged Theo, our lead compliance officer, and asked for a discreet favor: just a name, a date range, and a zip code. I didn't tell him it was my mother. An hour later, I had it. 3 withdrawals. October 10th, $20,000. October 15th, $15,000. October 20th, $15,000. And here was the thing, they weren't online transactions. They were done in person, at the local branch, at a teller window. I stared at the screen, heart pounding in a way no corporate audit had ever made it pound before. If it wasn't online, then the foundation of their accusation crumbled. I clicked on the link. Theo included security footage. Low resolution, grainy, but clear enough. The first clip loaded. A young woman in a hoodie and sunglasses walked to the counter, glancing around like she expected to be followed. When she pulled down her mask to speak to the teller, my stomach flipped. Lisa. Even after all these years, I knew her face. I'd braided that hair, helped her through breakups, stood beside her at her graduation. And now I was watching her impersonate our mother at a bank teller window. She handed over Mom's ID, signed a form, same handwriting she used to label her high school notebooks. I closed my eyes and let the truth sink in. This wasn't a mistake. It was a setup. I opened the second clip with hands colder than they should have been. October 15th, same branch, different face. David's. No mask, no hoodie, no shame. He was chatting with the teller like they were old friends, flashing that rehearsed smile he used whenever charm was currency. He slid a check across the counter, signed it with a flourish. $15,000. Gone. Just like that. I watched him laugh at something the teller said, then tuck his receipt into his coat pocket like it was just another errand on his list. This wasn't panic, this wasn't desperation, this was a performance. The third video brought Lisa back again, October 20th. Same posture, same counter, different sunglasses, like the world owed her anonymity. I paused the frame as she signed the withdrawal slip, compared the signature to one from a sticky note she left on Mom's fridge last week. Don't forget your vitamins, L. It matched, even the swoop of the L, but I needed more. Intent, access. I cross-checked the metadata from the online banking app. The first login after I'd left town hadn't come from Mom's phone. It had come from a tablet, a device registered to the same home Wi-Fi as Lisa's streaming account. The password reset email linked to a Gmail address I didn't recognize, but the recovery phone number, that one I did. It was David's. They had everything they needed, Mom's ID, her checkbook, her login info, and I'd given them the perfect cover story, the helpful daughter setting Mom up for the digital age. It all fell into place with the elegance of something carefully rehearsed. They hadn't just stolen money. They'd choreographed betrayal. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a long time. Then I opened my presentation software, the one I used for high-level briefings and legal depositions. I dragged in the videos, the screenshots, the logs, annotated everything. Then I reached into my suitcase, pulled out the slim black folder I always pack just in case, and printed the file to a nearby FedEx. I labeled it plainly, for the Bennetts. If they wanted a villain, I'd show them what it looked like when the villain built a case. I zipped the folder shut and stared at it for a long while. I wasn't angry yet, but I was ready. I drove back on a Monday just as the late autumn sun slanted across the road in that golden way it always did between Halloween and Christmas. There was something cruel in how beautiful the light looked, casting long, warm shadows on cold pavement like the world hadn't noticed anything had broken. The Bennett house sat the same as always, brick stoop wreath still hanging from the door, wind chimes rattling from the porch awning. But something inside me had shifted. Their driveway was full. David's navy SUV, Lisa's aging hatchback, Mom's sedan. I parked at the curb and sat for a moment, the leather folder heavy in my lap. It had the weight of a court summons, even though I wasn't pressing charges. Not yet. I looked up at the house that used to smell like vanilla and cardamom. I didn't knock. I walked through the front door like I used to when I lived there. Quiet, direct, already knowing where everything was. The kitchen was full. Lisa sat on the counter, swinging her legs like she was 13 again, coffee mug in hand. David leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, mouth tight. Mom stood by the sink drying dishes with a rhythm that had nothing to do with water. Dad stirred something on the stove, slow and deliberate. They looked up, but no one said anything, not even Mom. I walked past them without a word and placed the folder on the kitchen island, the same one where we used to roll cookie dough and slice apples for pie. Then I opened it. You believed I stole from Mom, I said, keeping my voice calm. Let me show you what really happened. I slid the first photo across the counter. Lisa, grainy but unmistakable, lowering her mask in front of a bank teller. Date stamped. October 10th. Not online, not me. No one moved. Then the second photo. David smiling casually, handing over a check at the teller window 5 days later. I could feel the shift in the room like a pressure drop before a thunderstorm. These were not strangers. They were my siblings. I laid out the teller slips. 3 withdrawals, 3 signatures. Then I matched Lisa's to her handwriting from a note still stuck to Mom's refrigerator. Silence. Lisa's fingers clenched around her mug. Her voice cracked the stillness. You went through our stuff. I looked at her steady. You went through Mom's. Mom reached for the paper, hands trembling. She read silently. Her lips parted, but no words came. Finally, she looked up, eyes wet. But the bank said it was done online. I nodded. That's what they thought. The money itself, in person. The online access came later from a tablet linked to your Wi-Fi with recovery info tied to David's phone. A silence heavier than grief fell across the room. I waited. I wanted to see who they'd be now that the truth was on the table. Lisa was the first to break. Not into apology, but into defense. Her voice was thin, bitter, already coiling into resentment. You always get everything, Lauren. The job, the recognition, the praise. I just wanted to level the playing field. There it was, not guilt, not regret, just envy dressed in justification. I stared at her, really saw her. Not the little sister I used to cover for when she snuck out past curfew. Not the college dropout who moved back in just until I figured things out. No, this was someone who had made a conscious choice to trade integrity for resentment. You didn't level the field, I said quietly. You burned it. David shifted near the fridge, rubbing a hand over his face. It wasn't personal, he said, voice flat. We thought you'd be fine. You make more than all of us combined. Mom wouldn't even notice. I blinked at him. It's always personal when it's family. Mom sat slowly at the table, the printed evidence still spread before her like a wake of paper graves. Her hands rested in her lap, open, empty. She didn't look at me, didn't look at them. You let me believe my daughter stole from me? She whispered to no one in particular. I didn't say anything. What could I say to that? Dad finally spoke, the only person who hadn't moved since I arrived. Lauren, he said, voice lower than I remembered. What are you going to do? I met his eyes that had once read bedtime stories, tied fishing hooks, driven me to debate tournaments. I'm not pressing charges, I said. But I've already sent everything to the family attorney. You can decide what happens next. His shoulders dropped like a man who had aged 20 years in 5 minutes. He nodded once, as if anything more would break him. I closed the folder. My hands moved by habit the same way I did in courtrooms after delivering damning financial evidence. Muscle memory didn't require emotion. You told me not to come back unless I returned the money, I said, voice steady. I didn't take the money, but I brought the truth. No one stopped me when I turned to leave. Not Lisa, not David, not even Mom. But just as I reached the doorway, I heard her voice, soft cracking. Lauren? I paused my hand on the door frame. Thanksgiving's over, I said. You all made sure of that? I walked out, not with the folder, not with the pie, just with my keys, my dignity, and the final realization that I was never really one of them, not the way I thought I was. And no one followed. Not then, not ever. I didn't drive home right away. I sat in my car, parked at the curb, watching the kitchen window glow softly through the falling dusk. The same window where I used to press cookie cutters into dough with Lisa, where we used to make secret hot cocoa blends and sneak extra marshmallows. Now it was just glass, just light. Just a room full of people who had let me become the enemy. No one came out. No one opened the door, shouted my name, or ran down the driveway with an apology caught in their throat. Inside, someone laughed. I think it was Lisa. And that hurt more than anything else, that she could return to laughter so easily, like the lie hadn't weighed a thing. Eventually, I started the engine. The street was quiet except for the low hum of other lives happening behind other doors. Porch lights blinked on one by one. A dog barked. A kid rode a scooter past, oblivious to the fact that, in the space of one dinner, I had lost a family. Back in Chicago, the city felt unfamiliar. Or maybe I was the one who had changed. I returned to work like nothing had happened. Answered emails, signed off on audits, went to meetings, smiled when people said Happy Monday. But something was different. I stopped calling on Sunday nights, stopped checking the family group chat, the one where they sent birthday gifts and blurry photos of casseroles. I let the voicemail icon on my phone blink red for 3 days before I finally listened. It was from Mom. Lauren, we were wrong. I know that now. I didn't want to believe it. I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive us. I just wanted you to know. The house feels empty. She hung up before the minute mark. No plea, no promise. Just that final sentence hanging in the air. A week later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, just cream envelope heavy with something inside. It was a photo. Melissa and David, ages 6, 8, and 10, sitting on the back porch in Halloween costumes. I was the scarecrow. Lisa had tinfoil fairy wings. David was covered in red paint pretending to be a zombie. On the back in slanted handwriting I didn't recognize was a single line. We didn't know how much we would miss you until you were gone. No signature. Just those words. And maybe it was true. Maybe they did miss me, but not the real me. They missed the version of me who didn't question, didn't confront, didn't fight back. That version of me was gone too. I didn't reply to the letter. Not because I didn't feel something, because I did. A strange ache like grief layered over memory. But I knew the difference between sentiment and sincerity. One came in envelopes. The other showed up in action. Lisa never reached out. David didn't either. But I heard from my cousin Mia, who still lived nearby. She texted me late one night. Lisa moved out. David too. Your mom's not speaking to either of them. I stared at the message for a while. Typed thanks and deleted it. Then typed, I'm sorry she has to go through that alone, and deleted that too. I didn't need updates. I needed distance. Instead of looking back, I turned to something that gave me purpose. I'd been toying with the idea for months, but now it felt urgent, necessary. I pitched a weekend seminar at the community college Financial Protection for Older Adults. The room was small, fluorescent lit, and smelled faintly of whiteboard cleaner. My first class had 6 people. Most of them retired, their faces lined with decades of life. I taught them how to recognize phishing attempts, how to lock their devices, how to appoint trustworthy financial proxies. I taught them what my family had never thought to ask me. One Saturday after class, a woman in her 70s with silver braids and a floral notebook stayed behind. She smiled as she approached. I wish I had a daughter like you, she said. I smiled back, politely, kindly, but I didn't say what I was thinking. So did mine once. The holidays came and went. No tree, no pie, no awkward ornament exchange where Lisa always forgot to wrap hers and David made jokes about his being homemade when it was clearly from the dollar store. Instead, I lit one small candle in my apartment and let the quiet settle around me. There's a kind of grief no one warns you about. Not the grief of death, but of betrayal. The grief that arrives when you realize the people you love chose someone else's version of you and stuck with it, even when the truth knocked on their door. It's not loud. It doesn't cry out. It just stops calling. I kept the folder. Not on my desk, not in the filing cabinet at work where I stored court evidence and audit trails, but in a drawer beside my bookshelf tucked beneath old tax returns, expired passports, and a dog-eared copy of my mortgage agreement. I haven't opened it since. I don't need to, because the facts haven't changed, and neither have they. Some days I find myself wondering if Mom still has the photo, if she looks at it the way I once did, not as a memory, but as a promise. A time when things were simple before lies dressed themselves up as misunderstandings. I don't dwell on it, but I don't deny it either. You don't come through something like that untouched. You come through it quieter, sharper, softer in strange places, harder in others. People at work noticed. They said I seemed more grounded, more focused. They didn't know it was because my foundation had been shattered and I had to build something sturdier with my own 2 hands. Sometimes when the city is quiet, when the hum of traffic fades and the streetlights blink like slow heartbeats, I make tea and sit by the window. I think about everything I lost and what I gained in return. I don't regret walking into that kitchen with the truth. I regret that no one stood up when I laid it down. And yet, I wouldn't change it, because truth is a strange kind of freedom. It doesn't fix what's broken, but it stops you from bleeding over it. Lisa and David made choices, so did I. Mom too, in her way. Forgiveness might come someday, or it might not. But silence, that's not the same as peace. And I've learned how to live without both. Some stories don't end with reconciliation. Some just settle. I stopped waiting for the call, the apology, the sudden moment of clarity where someone would say, we should have known it wasn't you. That day never came. And yet life kept going. My seminar expanded. Word spread. A local paper ran a story on elder fraud and mentioned my work. The photo they used was one I barely remembered posing for me, standing in front of a whiteboard, sleeves rolled, marker in hand. I looked like someone who knew what she was doing. Maybe I finally was. One of my students, a retired nurse named Clara, asked if I'd consider holding private sessions at senior centers. I said yes, not because I needed the work, but because I needed the connection. Each time I sat with someone and helped them navigate their accounts, strengthen their passwords, or recognize a scam, I felt like I was undoing a little of the damage, not just for them, but for me. One morning, I got a letter from the family attorney. It was short, just one sentence. Your mother transferred ownership of the house to her name alone. No further explanation, no request, just a correction. And that somehow was enough. She'd undone the shared title that once included all three of us, David, Lisa, and me. Now it was hers alone. A gesture, maybe? A line in the sand? But it wasn't my home anymore. That much had already been made clear. The truth didn't bring us back together, but it brought me back to myself. And sometimes that's the most anyone can hope for. Some betrayals don't come with raised voices or shattered plates. Sometimes they come with silence at the dinner table, eyes that won't meet yours, and a pie left untouched on a counter. Lauren Bennett's story isn't about revenge, it's about clarity, about what happens when someone finally stops asking to be believed and starts believing in herself. This wasn't just a story of family turning their back. It was the slow, methodical uncovering of a lie told by the very people she once protected. And while the truth didn't bring them back, it set her free. She didn't scream, she didn't burn bridges, she built something better, a seminar, a space, a second chance for strangers to be safer and for herself to begin again. If you've ever been blamed for something you didn't do, if your silence has been mistaken for guilt, if your loyalty was used against you, then this story is for you. And if you're still waiting for someone to say, I'm sorry, maybe you don't have to wait anymore, maybe the closure is in what you choose to build next. Drop a comment below. What time is it where you are, and what part of the story hit you hardest? Like this video, if you've ever had to walk away from people you loved. Subscribe for more stories like this where quiet strength takes the spotlight. You never know who needs to hear it next.